The fluorescent light above Clara Walcott's desk cast a cold sheen over the scattered census extracts, probate filings, and sepia-stained photographs. Most evenings at the Walcott Ancestral Research Agency ended like this, the building silent except for the hum of the scanner. Clara hunched over paper fragments, coaxing stories from silence. She specialized in stubborn cases, the kinds of commissions that other genealogists bounced back with a polite apology and a partial refund. Clara, however, relished resistance. On a drizzly Monday in April, a new file landed on her desk. The courier who delivered it looked relieved to be rid of the package, a weather-stained box wrapped in butcher paper, held shut with red string. Inside lay a single letter, a brass key, and a cashier's check for $10,000. The letter contained neither salutation nor signature. I request an exhaustive genealogical study of the Wagstaff bloodline from its earliest traceable ancestor to the present day. All relevant documents will be found at 219 Brattle Street, Cambridge, in the attic safe. The enclosed key opens it. Your work must be discreet. The line ends on December 2, 1988. I need proof. December 2, 1988. Clara blinked. That was her own birthday, down to the day. The coincidence felt superficial. Someone else must have been born that day too, but a whisper of unease slid under her ribs. She tried to imagine who would pay such a fee to confirm an endpoint that precise. A prank? A test? Clara set aside the doubt and slipped into her habits. Work first, wonder later. She logged the check, made a photocopy of the letter, and called her assistant David to block out the rest of the week. Then she drove across the Charles River to Brattle Street. 219 Brattle was a gabled Victorian behind a screen of overgrown yews. A for sale by owner sign leaned crookedly in the yard. The front door creaked open under her knock, revealing dust motes swirling in tired afternoon light. No voices, no footsteps. Either the owner was absent, or the house was trying to remember what company felt like. The attic stairs protested under her weight. At the top, a single trunk sat against the far wall. The key fit the lock, turning with a reluctant squeal. Inside rested bundles of documents separated by ribbon. Marriage licenses, land deeds, baptismal certificates, war records. An archivist's feast organized with near monastic precision. Clara sealed the trunk again, carried it to her car, and spent the night cataloging. The Wagstaff line sprouted in Kent, England, 1634, with a miller named Tobias Wagstaff. Tobias's son Barnabas came to Plymouth Colony in 1662. Barnabas's descendants scattered along the eastern seaboard, leaving a trail of black ink births and untimely deaths. Clara traced them through smallpox epidemics, revolutionary skirmishes, and Civil War drafts until the branches narrowed to one: Franklin Elijah Wagstaff, born in 1919 in Springfield, Massachusetts. Franklin married Alice Moreno in 1946. They produced two sons, Harold, born 1948, and Martin, born 1954. Martin died at 6 months of scarlet fever, leaving Harold the sole heir to the Wagstaff name. Clara leaned closer to the page. Harold Wagstaff. Last seen in the 1980 Abington Town Directory, listed as an assistant machinist at Porter & Sons. No marriage certificate in Massachusetts vital records. No property deeds. No probate. The paper trail halted. She opened the file labeled Supplemental. Inside lay a fold-out family tree. Someone had already carried the line one generation further. Scribbling in graphite, Harold Wagstaff, daughter Emily, adopted 1988, needs confirmation. Next to the word confirmation was a tiny red asterisk and a date. December 2nd, 1988. Harold's newborn daughter Emily born the same day as Clara. That explained the date, but questions multiplied. Who was Emily? Where did she go? And why had her father's skeleton record ended in 1980 if a child surfaced 8 years later? Clara lost sleep in those first 72 hours, sifting through state registries, hospital logs, private adoption agency ledgers. Name after name surfaced and dissolved. Name after name surfaced and dissolved. Emily Wagstaff never appeared. Meanwhile, the silent client pressed from afar. Every sunrise brought another unmarked envelope to the office door, a crisp $100 bill, and a card. No phone number, no email, no signature. The bills piled atop the safe, glossy and nervous. Clara tried to remind herself she loved puzzles, but the taste of this one was metallic. She called on favors. At the Boston Public Health Department, an archivist named Lucia let her into the Restricted Adoption Index. There, Clara found a single sealed record, issued December 4, 1988, 2 days after her birth. It bore only the baby's sex, female, the city Norwood, and an agency code. The birth parents' names were blacked out, replaced with numeric identifiers. Lucia watched Clara copy the code into her notebook. "You need a court order to unseal that," she said. Clara nodded absently. But instead of heading to a judge, she drove to Norwood General Hospital. The building had been renovated into a memory care facility, but the medical records wing still housed microfilm archives. How bad DeForest stole it from? She spent the afternoon cranking reels, her eyes blurring over obstetrics logs. 12 babies born December 2, 1988. Only one girl lacked a surname. The attending physician wrote, "Infant girl maternal complications, transferred after 36 hours. Transferred where? A nurse's scribble pointed to St. Agatha's Home for Children in Milton. Clara's body remembered St. Agatha's. She'd researched a client's foundling case there last year. She drove 20 minutes south. The nun at the reception desk recognized her. "Miss Walcott, chasing ghosts again?" "Always," Clara said. The intake books at St. Agatha's listed an unnamed infant admitted December 4 and discharged January 10. The discharge note bore the same agency code Lucia had shown her. Foster placement to the Ramirez family, Boston, pending adoption. Ramirez. Clara's heart rattled. Ramirez was her mother's maiden name. Sarah Ramirez, who died of ovarian cancer when Clara was 19. Her father, Walter Walcott, had always said he met Sarah while studying law at BU, married her in '86, had one child 2 years later. Walter still wore his wedding ring, still kept Sarah's letters. Could there have been another child? But if yes, why would the adoption file exist? Unless, Clara asked to copy the intake page. The nun refused, citing confidentiality, but allowed her to transcribe. Clara's hands shook as she wrote, "Foster Parent 1, Sarah Ramirez." Everything twisted 90 degrees. Her mother had been a foster parent to a newborn girl placed December 4, '88, 2-day-old infant. Same day Clara was presumably at home with her parents. Clara stared at the page until letters swam. She heard her mother's voice inside memory, soft Spanish lullabies, strong coffee aroma, laughter that filled ceilings. Was it possible her mother had fostered a baby hardly hours after delivering her own? That sounded impossible. Sarah had died before Clara found genealogy. She'd never asked. When Clara returned to her apartment, the answering machine blinked. The message was only static, then a clipped phrase, "Do not stop." She did not sleep. Instead, she dug. Vital records told her Sarah Ramirez had given birth at Brigham and Women's, not Norwood. Hospital bills confirmed it. A routine delivery, healthy mother and daughter, discharged December 5, 1988. So Sarah could not have fostered a baby during those days. Someone had used her name, or the intake book was wrong. She needed her father, but Walter Walcott was in Lisbon on a sabbatical. Charlotte Winston. She emailed, but his out-of-print reply said he was trekking in the Azores with limited service. Clara booked a flight to Springfield instead, seeking Harold Wagstaff's remains. She visited the Machinists' Union Hall, the last place his directory listing placed him. Retired men remembered Harold, thin, quiet, chain-smoked camels. Once said Harold left town in '81 after a breakdown. Another claimed Harold moved to a commune in Maine. The contradictions formed netting with holes. At the town clerk's office, Clara found Harold's death certificate. Date, January 12, 1989. Cause, carbon monoxide poisoning in a garage. Suicide. Informant, friend Walter Walcott. Clara nearly dropped the paper. Her father had been the one to report Harold's death. The genealogist's impartial distance shattered. She sat in her rental car, certificates shaking in her lap, while the engine idled. Walter Walcott knew Harold Wagstaff. Walter had never mentioned him. Piece by piece, the puzzle redrew itself. Sarah Ramirez fosters an unnamed infant who perhaps never existed. Walter Walcott signs the death certificate of that infant's presumed father, and an anonymous client pays Clara a fortune to confirm the line ends on her birthday. Clara's instincts screamed that someone was puppeteering. She drove to her childhood home in Brookline. The key still worked. The house smelled of cedar and long vacant weekends. Upstairs in her father's study, rows of case files lined the wall. Her father's legal practice had specialized in trusts and estates. They were orderly, but a lower drawer stuck. Inside lay a manila folder labeled Wagstaff. Clara unfolded documents. Deposition notes, psychiatric evaluations, a guardianship petition. The petitioner, Walter Walcott. SC, the subject, Harold Wagstaff. Date, October 1980. Harold had been ruled mentally incompetent after a psychotic episode. Walcott was appointed guardian ad litem while the court sought permanent care. But Harold disappeared before admission to Bridgewater State Hospital. Case closed, unsolved. Another envelope carried a photograph. Her father on a fishing pier beside a lanky man with hollow cheeks. Harold, presumably. The back bore Sarah's handwriting. Walter and Harold, Wellfleet, Aug. 81. There was also a birth certificate. Clara slid it free. Name, Emily Sarah Wagstaff. Father, Harold. Mother, unknown. Date of birth, December 2, 1988. Place, Norwood General Hospital. Informant, W. Walcott, guardian. Clara sank against the desk, heart hammering. Emily existed, and her father had been the infant's legal guardian. Another slip of paper held a single line typed, "Adoptive parents withdrew. Infant unplaced." Next to it, "Surrender to Walcott family, private." The surrender form lacked signatures. Her stomach flipped. If the adoption fell through, where did Emily go? Why was there no further record? A memory surfaced, one she'd never questioned. She'd been 6, rummaging through the attic while her parents hosted a barbecue. In a cobwebbed corner under a tarp, she found a wooden cradle. It smelled faintly of lavender. She asked her mother about it. Sarah laughed, tousled her hair, and said, "We thought we'd have a house full, but you kept us busy enough." Clara returned to the cradle in her mind. She recalled something else, too, a faint series of vertical scratches on its side, as if someone had tried to tally days. She printed the photo of Walter and Harold, the birth certificate, the psychiatric report. Then she sat on the carpet and wept, part grief, part anger at the living and dead for their conspiracy of silence. When tears dried, she faced the truth she documented for stranger after stranger. Records don't lie, but they do hide. She had to talk to her father. Walter answered her satellite call on the second ring, Portuguese wind roaring in the background. He sounded delighted. "Pumpkin, how's Boston?" "Dad," she said, "I need you to tell me about the Wagstaffs." There was a pause long enough for continents to realign. "Where did you hear that name?" "I'm looking at a photograph of you and Harold. I have Emily's birth certificate." "I know you were her guardian." More silence. Then a sigh like an old tree cracking. "I wondered when it might find you." Clara clinched the phone. "You hid an entire child, Dad." "Why?" "Because he asked me to." "Harold?" "And your mother." The wind swallowed his words. Clara walked to the window to ground herself. "Explain everything, now," Walter began in soft, resigned fragments. Harold and Walter had met at BU. Walter a law student. Harold a maintenance worker auditing literature courses. They bonded over poetry. Harold struggled with schizophrenia, cycling through states of clarity and terror. Sarah, then studying nursing, joined their circle, often calming Harold through episodes. In late 1980, Harold's condition worsened. His family had disowned him years prior. Walter petitioned for guardianship to keep Harold out of jail. Harold vanished. 8 years later, Harold reappeared on Walter's doorstep, gaunt, with a newborn wrapped in a wool shawl. The mother, Harold said, had died during labor in an abandoned farmhouse. He gave no name. He pleaded with Walter. Keep her safe. The Wagstaff line ends here. Sarah had just discovered she was pregnant. Walter wanted to call authorities. Sarah could not bear the thought of the baby entering the system. They agreed to foster the infant under false paperwork, intending to stabilize Harold first. But Harold spiraled. On January 12, he rigged a hose from his tailpipe. Walter found him too late. His suicide note said, "My family ends with me. Please, do not let her bear my name. Give her yours." The adoption process was impossible to regularize without exposing falsified documents. Sarah redrafted forms, created a second birth certificate, naming herself mother, Walter father. That certificate belonged to Clara. The baby known as Emily became Clara. The biological child Sarah carried miscarried during the winter flu. Walter's voice cracked remembering it. They buried the fetus, then sealed every trace. "You were 5 pounds 2 ounces, Walter said, voice shaking. "You clung to Sarah's finger like you already knew her. In every way that mattered, you were ours." Clara pressed her forehead to the cold glass. Overhead, contrails crossed like question marks. She tried to align new coordinates. She had lived 33 years believing biology irrelevant to belonging. Yet she'd built a career on bloodlines. Now the world said she'd charted others' lines while misplotting her own. "Why hire me to solve this?" she asked. "I didn't," Walter whispered. "I swear." "Then who?" "I only ever told one other person," Walter said. "David," her assistant. Clara ended the call and dialed the office. David picked up. "Hey, boss. You sent the Wagstaff case." His exhale was audible. "I hoped you'd forgive me once you knew." "Explain." "I found the trunk during the office move last year. Your name under an eraser smudge on the family tree. I thought, if anyone deserved her own truth, it was you. But you'd never choose yourself as a client, so I became one. The courier, the envelopes, the money, David's savings. Why didn't you just tell me?" "Evidence first," he said. "You taught me that." Anger flared, but beneath it gratitude glowed. Evidence first had led her here. She drove to the office at dawn. David waited, coffee in trembling hands. She stared at him, then hugged him hard enough to bruise. Over the next weeks, Clara recharted the Wagstaff tree. She added herself. Clara Sarah Wagstaff Walcott, born Emily 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 Sarah Wagstaff Walcott. December 2nd, 1988. A line once doomed to extinction branched again. She scanned documents, wrote reports, and submitted petitions to amend sealed records legally. Some nights, she wept for parents who had died keeping vows to each other, to Harold, to a child they named twice. Other nights, she smiled at the wonder of being chosen. When the paperwork was complete, Clara drove back to 219 Brattle Street. The for sale sign was gone. Ivy climbed the porch. She unlocked the door, ascended to the attic, and placed the updated family tree inside the trunk. On its final page she wrote, "The Wagstaff line continues, not by blood alone, but by love's deliberate grafting. C." She locked the trunk and left the key under the mat, feeling the house exhale. Outside, spring pushed green through cracks. Clara dialed her father overseas. When he answered, she said, "Dad, I traced our roots. Turns out they're deeper than anyone knew." Walter's voice wavered. "You still my little girl?" "I always was," she said. "And now I'm also Harold's. The tree is wide enough." She hung up and walked toward her car, the morning unfolding like a family record newly unsealed, dates and names now living tissue. In the driver's seat, she opened her notebook to a blank page and wrote a single sentence to anchor her new beginning. Genealogy is the work of turning absence into presence. She underlined it twice, closed the book, and started the engine, already imagining the next story she'd help someone find, knowing that, at last, Roan had found her.